Okay, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of CDK Live. I'm hoping my audio is working and everyone can hear me okay. Of course, leading right up into this, the demo gods had some words for me and we had to, battle, but we're here and I think everything's working as expected. So that said, thank you so much for joining the stream, for watching. For those that are going to watch later the recorded stream, hello to you as well. So a couple of things before we get into our show for today. First and foremost, we had a lot of really great announcements at reInvent. Ton of really cool stuff around generative AI. We saw Amazon Q was announced in preview. A lot of cool functionality with Code Whisperer. And what was really neat to see with all the Gen AI announcements was how it's not just chat related. It's not just kind of this generic chatbot, functionality. It's much more. And we showed that, with all these Gen AI features, they're integrated into various services like Amazon Connect, and so on. So a lot of really cool stuff there. But specifically in the infrastructure as code world, not sure if I said that right. We announced a couple of things. And one of those announcements that we made in preview was for a feature for the AWS CDK called CDK Migrate. And essentially, this feature is in preview, but essentially this is a feature of the CDK CLI that allows you to point to a CloudFormation template and say migrate this to a CDK application in the language that I prefer to author in, and then the CDK does all the good stuff behind the scenes and takes that CloudFormation template and then converts it into a CDK application. So we will have a show later in the month on that, so keep an eye out for that. In addition, we did have some releases on the CDK side. Couple of things. API Gateway, the API Gateway v2 construct went from graduated to stable, or GA. So if you're wondering, when do I use the API Gateway v1 construct versus v2? At this point, it's pretty straightforward. The v2 construct is really great if you're looking to build HTTP APIs. If you're building REST APIs with API Gateway, you want to stick with v1. In addition, another couple cool features that we had was with RDS. So, one of my favorite components of the AWS CDK is the ability to leverage these grant methods. And these are a part of these L2 constructs, where essentially they simplify the connecting of resources in AWS. So when you think of, I need to connect my Lambda function to a DynamoDB table, you got to create an IAM policy, an IAM role, attach that to the Lambda function, make sure you have everything working as you expect. Well, the CDK simplifies a lot of that with these grant methods, grant read write, and so on. So RDS, we released a grant connect method for RDS, so you can simplify IAM authentication from your resources to RDS with this method. In addition, the last thing I'll mention, just worth noting, is Lambda released functionality to support more advanced structured logging. So that feature is now available in the CDK when using the Lambda function construct as well. Okay, so that is everything related to the CDK and announcements and kind of some various things that we've released. Now, the title of this channel is CDK Live, but of course, we don't scope it just to CDK, even though CDK is in the title. Really, anything infrastructure as code related, we want to talk about on this show. And, one of the announcements that came at reInvent was a feature for CloudFormation called Git Sync. And when we think about our current workflow, if you're deploying infrastructure as code, there's a couple different ways you can deploy it today. And specifically, if you're using CloudFormation, one, you can create your own CI/CD pipeline, and that pipeline can deploy your IaC templates to CloudFormation. You may have some validations built in there and all that good stuff. Or maybe you're just deploying straight through the console, or maybe you're making API calls locally. Whatever that is, there's some process that you have to build and maintain to support that workflow. So with Git Sync, essentially this feature enables users of CloudFormation to manage the deployment of their stacks using source control. So using Git, GitHub, for example. There's various supported Git providers, which we'll look at in just a minute. But essentially, this works at the stack level. So theoretically, you could have the same template that deploys multiple stacks all from Git. And we're going to look at that as we demo the feature and walk through it. So if there's any questions, please always feel free to leave a comment, leave ask your question in chat and so on. But we're definitely here to answer those as we walk through and demo the feature. So the way this works is you essentially have to set up a connection from AWS to your Git repository. And behind the scenes, this feature is going to essentially monitor a specific branch for any changes made to that template that you've defined, the location of the template that you've defined in your Git repo. And on change, it will run a change set. And on commit, it'll run a change set and then push those changes and deploy them to CloudFormation on your behalf. So before we get into it, actually, no, we're just going to get right into it right now. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start by working in the IDE, and then we'll go to the console to walk through the feature and demo it from there. So we'll start here. And so what you can see here is I have a basic, CloudFormation template. So it's a very simple example, but I have a couple of parameters. And when you're defining your infrastructure as code, you want to make it as reusable as possible. And so parameters are a great way to change certain values of resources based on an input parameter. When it comes to naming, maybe there's also a parameter that could be environment name and so on. That way resources can be dynamic, and the parameters are the only thing that are changing in the template, but everything else is relatively static. You may have some conditionals, some looping in there, but overall, that's how you can make your templates dynamic and very reusable. So I just have a couple of parameters here. Ultimately, in this template, I'm just defining a Lambda function. I have an inline code here to my function that's just going to return a simple response. And the function response itself is actually going to be an input parameter here. And that's how we're going to show in the demo, this working in real time and showing how the Git sync works. So we have an IAM role or Lambda function, defining an S3 bucket as well. And in this S3 bucket, one of the values that's dynamic is the tag. So we just have this dynamic tag key, and then every time we change that, it will update the tag accordingly. So again, this is all just demo related, just to show that we can leverage Git to manage the deployment of our CloudFormation stacks. Okay, so that's all I have here in this repository. And now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the console, and we're going to set up CloudFormation Git Sync. We're going to deploy a stack, which is going to look at this Git repository, look at this template, and deploy it. And the main question that may be running through your head right now is, you have a template, you have a Git repo, but how is CloudFormation going to be aware of the template location as well as the parameters? How do I know if we want to change parameters based on various environments we want to deploy to? That's what we're going to show here in just a moment. So let's get this open here. We're gonna switch our screen share here, and that'll take just a moment. So we'll go here, and let's see if we can find the right one. I think this is my window. This appears to be the right window. Perfect. Okay, here we are. So let's move this here, and now we have our code here. Okay, so again, I mentioned here's that Git repo. This is that template file I was looking at. Let's zoom in a couple notches here. And you can see the same template is here. So now let's head over to the console. And by the way, if you want to read documentation on the Git Sync feature, it's posted here in chat. But of course, Definitely, read up on this feature, better understand it as you start to deploy it and mess around with it, because ultimately you want to make sure that this can work to support your use cases as they come up. And hey, to Samuel Bivens in chat, I think I know you, sir. Good to see you. Okay, so let's dive right into the feature. So we're going to create a stack, and if you've done this before and you've worked in the console, you'll know these two inputs here are very familiar, and everything down here is relatively familiar. I'm sorry, these three inputs. What's new here is I'm going to deploy a new template, but I don't want to upload it. I don't want to pass in an S3 URL. I want to sync from Git. So I'm going to select this sync from Git option. And again, it's really important to read the documentation, because you'll see here that compliance and various things that may be important to your organization you want to look into for this feature. So now we're going to enter a stack name here. So we'll just name it CDK Live CFN Git Sync Demo. And now you'll see the next parameter or the next option here is the stack deployment file. So this is how Git Sync is going to know for this particular stack, A, where does the template live? And B, what are the parameters that you want to define for this particular stack? So there's two options here. One, I can just provide my own file. If I've been doing this for a while, I already know what I'm doing, I may want to choose this option. But here's the really cool thing about this feature is the communication between AWS and Git is bidirectional. It's two-way. So when you make commits to Git, we're going to catch those commits. We're going to trigger the proper deployment workflow to deploy the template, and update the stack accordingly. But also, if you decide to let CloudFormation create this template file, it will actually submit a pull request with that configuration file to your repository into the branch that you define. So I'm going to let CloudFormation here define this. And actually, let me zoom in a little more just in case. It may be hard to see. So I'm going to let CloudFormation submit the pull request with the deployment configuration and everything, so I don't have to think about it. Now, the next step is to define our Git repository. So I already have, I believe, I don't have anything connected yet. Let's see. I don't. So I'm going to link a Git repository. Now, it's really important that you read through the documentation and walk through these steps as well. But essentially, there are some prerequisites. One, you need an IAM role that's going to allow for CloudFormation to do some of these things on your behalf. Two, you have to have a connection set up between your Git provider and AWS. And if you don't, you can add a new connection. It's very easy here. This will take you to the place where you need to set that up. Let's actually show what that looks like. So here, this is under the developer tools connections feature. I can name my connection. I choose the provider that I want to connect to. And so you can see here, these are the supported Git providers. So you have, GitLab, Bitbucket, GitHub, GitHub Enterprise Server. So I've already done this, but essentially I'm going to use GitHub, and I have a GitHub app created. It's all connected with AWS and ready to go. So we have our connection set up, and now I'm going to choose the repository. So in the title of this live stream, I mentioned throw out your IaC pipelines, and I even mentioned the term GitOps. This is going to feel very close to a GitOps type workflow, where essentially we're leveraging Git as the source of truth. So our templates will live in our Git repository, and CloudFormation is going to monitor the commits to this repository to a particular branch, and then deploy the changes as commits come in and as we update and modify our template. Now, the one thing that is, so this is GitOps like, it's not full GitOps, because truly in a full GitOps type workflow, which is, by the way, really big in like the Kubernetes world, there's auto reconciliation as well. So like when drift is detected, the job of the GitOps engine is to ultimately reconcile drift. In this case, This is just going to push deployments and updates as you update that template. But of course, and this is one thing, as you start to use this feature, reach out if there's any feature requests, anything you want to see added into this functionality, because the service team, of course, wants to hear about it, and we want to continuously improve and add on as customers request it. So I'm going to choose my repository. So I have my CDK Live Git Sync demo repo, and I will choose my branch. So the next step is to define the path of the deployment file. So that's that configuration that's going to define where my template exists and any input parameters that we want to pass in. So let's just name it cfn deploy.yaml. And then I have the choice to have CloudFormation create a role for me, or I can leverage an existing role. I happen to have a role already created, but again, in that documentation, there's details on the exact policies that you need to create. But if you don't want to and you want to let CloudFormation create the role, it can do that as well. And it will create a role that is scoped and least privileged to your particular deployment here. Okay, and then we're going to define our template path. So this is where our CloudFormation YAML lives. So as I showed in the repository, this is going to be template.yaml. That's the name of the file here. So I need to tell CloudFormation to look at the template.yaml file for our CloudFormation template. Now, the other thing we can do here is we can add some parameters. So if we go back to our template, remember, I have a couple parameters here. So one, we'll go with function response. Now, by the way, I don't have to pass in parameters because I have defaults set here. But of course, you're probably going to want to do that. So let's make function response CDK live demo. And my other input parameter is bucket tag. And so, you know what? Let's keep bucket tag out. We'll leave that to the default so we can see what that looks like. Now, I'm not going to add any tags right now, but so far what we have is our connection set up. We're deploying our stack, and we've told CloudFormation we want CloudFormation to create that deployment configuration file for our template in our stack. So I'm going to leave everything else as default. I'm going to click next, and then we're going to click submit. So now, behind the scenes, what's happening is AWS and CloudFormation is setting up this connection. It's ensuring that it can connect to the Git repository, and then it's going to, in the next couple of moments here, actually submit that pull request with that deployment configuration. Now, while we wait for that, what you can see here is we have the status of our Git Sync connection all set up here and ready to go. So I can see that the provisioning status, the sync status. So if anything goes wrong, I can see very quickly, here's what's happening with my CloudFormation sync with Git, and I can try to figure out what's going on. So now we've provisioned this, and you'll see it says failed here. Now the reason for that is because it's our first deployment, and we said I want CloudFormation to submit this as a pull request. We need that deploy YAML merged into our branch. So it doesn't know how to deploy our configuration just yet, or deploy our CloudFormation stack just yet. So you can see this is our this is the pull request that CloudFormation submitted, and CloudFormation it gives you a little walkthrough of how this works, what the point of this file is, and how gives you instructions on how to update and so on. And Sam has a really good question. Samuel, I'll call you Samuel because Samuel is your name here in chat. Does this feature integrate with CDK? So at this time, it's not a very native experience. So really, this feature is focused on CloudFormation because the CDK has some other dependencies and other build processes when it deploys. It's not really a native feature for CDK just yet, but this is really tailored to CloudFormation users and scoped to CloudFormation use cases. But of course, the CDK does output to CloudFormation as the Cloud Assembly. So you could always, build your own workflow to do that. But it's recommended that for the CDK, stick with the the way you have pipeline set up now. That's going to be the recommended path for now. But I'll tell you, Pahud, he works at AWS. He's amazing. We did a show a few weeks ago. He actually, like right when we released this feature, he came out with a little demo on how to use this with the CDK. So again, it's really to get that full native clean experience. It's going to work best with CloudFormation. Okay, so we have our pull request that CloudFormation submitted, and you can see this is our deployment configuration for our CloudFormation stack. So here's our template YAML file. Here are the parameters. So these are the parameters that CloudFormation expects in that template. And then if we want to add any tags, we can do that here as well. So I like this pull request. I'm going to merge it. And we're then going to head back to CloudFormation here. And what we should see in the next couple of seconds here, what's going to happen is CloudFormation is going to catch that commit, and then it's going to deploy it or deploy those changes. And now in the background, what happens is it actually creates a change set, monitors those changes, and then deploys them. So, oops, I went to the wrong thing here. Let's see. Let's go back to Git Sync, and let's see what is going on. So, and of course, things happen, during demos here. Let's see. So we have our CDK Live Git Sync demo. Let's make sure I merged it properly. I did. And so we go to our code here, and let's see. We have our parameters. Let's see, let's make sure. Did it not catch the commit? Let's see. The best is when things go wrong, when you do this live. I'm always a big fan of this. But so look, so here's the latest commit it has. Let's see where our commit is here. I'm trying to look at this. So yeah, definitely our commit did go through here. Make sure. So we merged. Let's update this file really quick. And let's add our other template here. So let's move this over. And then what was my other input? I think it was bucket tag. Let's add bucket tag. And then CDK. I wonder if I need to quote the parameters there. So let's see. So what should happen is, there we go. So now we have our change was caught, and CloudFormation is going to recognize that commit. It's going to look in the code here, and then it's going to run a change set. So it's going to actually check the diff of the what's being deployed, and then it's going to deploy the resources for us. So if we head back to our template here, let's see. So now you can see the repository synced. It got our latest commit, and now it is provisioning updates. So if we go to our events, we can see it's making some updates here, and we can see the S3 buckets being updated. And then let's see here. We wait for, actually, I'm sorry, not updated. It's creating the resources because they weren't created yet. So it's creating these resources, and then we should, in just a moment here, when this is all done, so you can see it's created our S3 bucket, it's created our Lambda function. And now if we go to, for example, here, let's open up our S3 bucket and our Lambda function. So here's our S3 bucket. And then if we look at the tags, we can see here's that tag we created from those parameters. So remember, you go back here to our commit, and you look, bucket tag is CDK live. We can see that input parameter was passed in and updated accordingly. And then if we go to our Lambda function, you can see here's our code that we deployed. And then if we look at, so CDK live demo should be our function response. I wonder if it'll quote it. We're going to find out if it's going to recognize this whole thing as a string or if the spaces will cause issues. So let's go to our configuration. We should have environment variables. There's our function response. So let's test it and then invoke the function. And there you go. So we can see CloudFormation recognize that commit as soon as I committed my changes. CloudFormation Git Sync took those changes in, ran a change set to see what was changing, and then updated the stack accordingly. So if we go back to our Git repo here, let's make a quick update just for fun. And then since Sam was chatting with us, we're going to change our function response to Sam Bivens. We're going to commit our changes. And again, what we should see here is CloudFormation will catch these changes and then trigger the deployment accordingly. So that is pretty much the feature and how it works. And there's not a whole lot else to say outside of what we showed. But of course, if there's any questions or anyone wants to dive into anything any deeper, please feel free to reach out. But yeah, so this is our Git Sync feature. And what we were able to do was create our template, our CloudFormation template, store that in our Git repo. And we stored that as our template.yaml. We had some input parameters to dynamically mutate the stack based on those inputs. And then we had CloudFormation, when we set up our Git Sync configuration, CloudFormation created this template file or this configuration file, submitted it as a pull request to our repo. And then from there, we were able to leverage all of the Git Sync functionality. We pushed some changes through Git, we made some commits, and then the functionality deployed our changes accordingly. So that really wraps it up for this feature. I'm just going to quickly look back here, see if anyone has any questions or anything. And if we go back and look at our, let's see here, this changed minutes ago. And there you have it. Okay. So that's it for this feature. I'm going to wrap the show up, but I'm just going to quickly look, see. Yep. So we talked about the CDK integration. Again, the docs are here. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on, via comments here, via social media, at Real Adam J. Keller on Twitter or X. And then, of course, GitHub, Adam J. Keller. You can follow me there. But that's it. So, again, wrapping up, we were able to take our CloudFormation template, store it in Git, set up a configuration between CloudFormation and our Git repository to deploy a stack every time we make updates to our template files, and ultimately move towards a GitOps type workflow by leveraging Git as the source of truth for all of our changes. We didn't have to build any CI/CD pipelines. We didn't have to build any custom automation. That's all built in here. One other thing I want to mention is a question that comes up and that I want to address specifically is around, if you already have a CloudFormation deployment pipeline, should you move to this feature? And I will preface it by saying it depends. It depends on what you have built into your workflow presently. If you have a lot of automation around like linting, maybe you have some like policy as code built into your pipelines. At this point, this feature it doesn't have any policy as code built in or anything like that. So if you have that workflow that exists already and you want to move to this functionality, you'll want to move the policy as code validations and maybe any linting you do to like pull request checks, to post commit hooks, things like that, where in your Git repo, it will actually run those checks for you to ensure that, policies are being met, compliance is being met, and that, all the formatting is as you expect. If you're not there yet and you're just, you're deploying right now through the console, through your laptop, or just through some, pipeline that just simply deploys, this is a great feature to move to right away. So that's all we have today. Thank you so much, everyone. And we will catch you next time for our next show, which we'll be talking about CDK Migrate, which is in preview. So that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So thanks again. See you soon.